Bi-state development exists to provide regional solutions to regional challenges. It's what we've been doing since we were formed 67 years ago. We're very good at it. We have some of the most tremendous talent in St. Louis, making our region better. Nothing we do in a vacuum. We work with communities, we work with cities, we work with neighborhoods. It's the partnerships and the collaborations which we foster, both public and private sector, to make both our company and our region successful.
The tourism to Missouri is largely linked to the Arch. This project is the largest public-private partnership that the National Park Service has ever been involved in. The general idea was to join the city to the Arch and to the river. It's really about rediscovering the Arch. And if we didn't have a partner like Bi-State, that wouldn't have occurred.
What Cortex is doing is creating an innovation community of creative entrepreneurs. A fundamental value is creating a car-optional environment. We draw from a large metro area. So the addition of having a metro station here is very much a win for all of us, and it could only have been accomplished through a public-private partnership with Metro.
We are one of the colleges of St. Louis University. We have students from all over the world. You know, the cost of flight training is so horribly expensive that we have to find new efficiencies wherever we can. So this is the perfect fit. And this airport and its location best serves the needs of the student.
Foster is actually the second oldest helicopter company in the country, and it's been based here, part of the downtown airport. Our growth was so fluid and dynamic and growing faster than we expected. And to kind of help us bridge that gap in the meantime, Bi-State worked with us and found us a temporary leasing situation in a larger hangar here at the airport to allow the flight school to still operate and keep us growing.
At Missouri Foundation for Health, we really seek to serve the communities most in need across the state of Missouri. Part of our job is to translate what's possible. We view ourselves as a funder, yes, but also as a catalyst and as a convener. Partnerships are integral to everything we do. So when this idea came to us from Bi-State about offering staple foods at the most well-traveled Metrolink stations, I was excited because a transportation agency was coming to us and saying, let's work on food access. This is an issue that affects the population that we serve, and we know it's a big need in the region. So how can we put our thinking hats on and to try to create a new partnership to have a new offering for our customers, which is the transit riders of St. Louis.
Nowhere else in the country is anybody looking and focusing on freight. Bi-State development through the St. Louis Regional Freightway is doing that. From our perspective at America's Central Port, we look to the Regional Freightway as that opportunity for growth, bringing both sides of the river together with so many river terminal facilities moving agricultural products from rail and truck out to barge. We've got more river terminals handling that agricultural product in a 15-mile stretch on the river here than anywhere else in the country. The St. Louis Regional Freightway now is getting us out there, getting us out in front of a lot of people all across the world. Our partnership with Bi-State Development has helped us market our facilities and grow our economy in a way that we wouldn't have experienced otherwise.
What most people really want is, as they live their lives, they want to leave the world better than they found it. They want to create a place where their children can thrive, where they can find the opportunities. And that's very important to all of us at Bi-State. We want to do well, we want our families and our friends to do well, and to the extent that we make a contribution to make that happen, that's really tremendously rewarding to look out at our region and know that, you know, there are good things going on, and we make a contribution to help make that happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chairman of the Bi-State Development Board of Commissioners, David Dietzel, and the President and Chief Executive Officer of Bi-State Development, John Nations.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm Dave Dietzel. I'm chairman of the board of Bi-State Development. It's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the entire Board of Commissioners of Bi-State Development for our annual meeting. We're glad you're here as we come together to celebrate what has been an amazing year of growth and progress for the Bi-State region. We would like to extend a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Lashley & Bear, as well as our leadership sponsors, Lowenbaum, Cigna, and Enterprise Holdings. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce the President and Chief Executive Officer of Bi-State Development, John Nation.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a real pleasure to see all of you, and thank you for joining us today. At Bi-State, we take special pride in being able to deliver impactful services, programs, and projects to make our region successful. But at Bi-State Development, it all starts with a committed Board of Commissioners who devote incalculable time to our many endeavors. It is simply not possible in just a few seconds this afternoon to describe all of the demands on our commissioners and the commitment it takes on the part of each and every one of them to make our company successful. They have very high expectations and high ideals, and they insist, rightly so, on the highest standards of responsibility, policy, goals, performance measures, and audible results to ensure our success. Successful people who donate their time to make our company and our region successful, and we owe them a tremendous thank you. You know, over the years, as I've spoken at many events around the country on management and at seminars, you know, I always say that the first element of a successful organization, whether it's public or private or whatever you do, is element number one is get a good and successful board. That is element number one, and we've been very fortunate to have that at Bi-State Development. It's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce several members of our board who are here. Several of them could not make it this afternoon just because they had travel plans at this time of year. But you heard from our chairman, Dave Dietzel. Frankly, Dave has been chairman of our board for about 5 years and donated just a tremendous amount of his time to make it successful. He frankly deserves a big round of applause for his contributions. From St. Clair County, Illinois, we have Jeff Watson. Jeff's. Also from St. Clair County, Illinois, Mike Buellhorn. From St. Louis County, Vernal Brown. And from the city of St. Louis, Aaliyah Holman. We're also delighted to have some special guests. First, a man whose name is not a household name in St. Louis, but I guarantee you that everybody in this room and around this region benefits from his work. We are delighted to have the Regional Administrator for the Federal Transit Administration with us this afternoon, who traveled here from Kansas City, Mr. Makti Ahmad. Makti, stand up, take a bow. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's a distinct pleasure for me to bring to the stage and introduce to you. It's always kind of funny to do an introduction to someone who really needs no introduction in any room throughout our region. She has been a tremendous supporter of Bi-State and public transit throughout all of her years of public service. That continues in the mayor's office. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very, very pleased to have a very special guest with us this afternoon to talk to you for a few minutes. Please welcome our mayor, Lyda Krewson.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that great introduction. And thanks to all of you for being here today. How about this presentation that we just had a few minutes ago? I say a round of applause for the people who put that together, because that is so stunning, stunning. So catalyst. That's the word that we've been seeing up here, catalyst. And I think that that's a great theme for today's annual meeting, and how appropriate, because that's what Bi-State Development Agency is for our region. It acts as a catalyst. To be a catalyst is to be an agent of change, an initiative, an individual, an organization, even an idea that speeds up growth and progress in our region. Speed's critical. The world we live in today requires more than just going through the motions of moving forward. We need to accelerate that into the future. Today, everybody's trying to do that. Nashville, Cincinnati, Austin, Kansas City, but also metropolitans around the globe, metropolitan areas around the globe. We need catalysts, more catalysts, to help make our region faster and more nimble than our competition. The good news is that it's already happening here. It's happening because of the potential and the resources that are unique to our region. According to Forbes, pretty credible source, we are one of the top 10 cities for millennials. Young people are coming here, they're staying here, they're living here, they're starting their careers here, they're starting their businesses here, and it's for a good reason. We're a top 10 city for startups and innovation. T-Rex downtown, Cortex in Midtown, 39 North Ag Tech Innovation District in St. Louis County. We've got lively and diverse neighborhoods, a competitive cost of living, world-class cultural institutions, and many popular attractions. Of course, the new, renewed Arch and Arch grounds, which are going to be fully open here in just the next few months. So we're lucky in that way. We've got strong, diverse, educated workforce, top-rated educational institutions in the world, and we're home to businesses that are leaders in finance, science, healthcare, agriculture, biotechnology, information technology. We've got everything that we need here to be even more successful. But we always need more catalysts, more sparks. That's you, each of you. Keep being a catalyst. Give off some more sparks. Don't be humble or shy about our strengths. Just do a little more to help propel our region forward. Bi-State Development is certainly one of those sparks, big sparks. It brings us together both literally and figuratively. Bi-State Development stimulates, new development and tackles regional challenges, from public transportation to the region's freightway, which you saw on the screen a few minutes ago, to tourism, to aviation. Bi-State Development is a catalyst for economic growth and regional collaboration. We need that energy and action for our region to thrive. So be a catalyst. As I mentioned earlier, join Bi-State, generate some more sparks. Be an agent of positive change for our community and our region. And I look forward to continuing to work with John at Bi-State, with Bi-State Development, the entire staff, with all of you, to sprint into the future for a more exciting and prosperous area for everyone. And thank you all for being here today. I think it speaks mountains that you all have taken an hour or two out of your day in order to come and congratulate Bi-State and celebrate these successes. And thank you to our servers who are here today, who are making their way through the crowd. You know, make it easy on them. And I think now you get to enjoy your lunch. Thank you all.
And with that, we are going to serve lunch, and we will be back. Look at your watch. We will be back at 12:30. We like to stay on time. It's a hallmark of what we do. Please enjoy your lunch. We'll be back. Thank you. Bi-State has been around for 67 years. We exist by virtue of an agreement between the states of Missouri and Illinois, and we were incorporated by an act of Congress. President Truman actually signed our original charter. We were formed to really serve the Bi-State region in a number of ways as an economic development facilitator. In the 1950s, we did the original planning on the interstate highway system. We did the work that led to the formation of the Metropolitan Sewer District. The region started coming to us to help provide regional solutions to truly regional challenges, which is how we ended up taking over public transit in April of 1963, why we ended up helping with the Gateway Arch and operating the Gateway Arch from the time that it opened, why we own the third busiest airport in the state of Illinois, why we're the freight and logistics district for St. Louis now. Those truly regional challenges that require a cooperative regional approach is what the region comes to us for, and something we've been doing for a very long time. I would dare anyone to find a region in the country that has proven to be more versatile over time than St. Louis. We started out cutting ourselves out of the wilderness as a fur trading post, then became a major industrial hub. Then in the mid-1900s, as they used to say, we were first in booze, first in shoes, and last in the American League. And then we became automobile manufacturing. Now we've transitioned the economy again, very heavy in healthcare, very strong in education, financial services sector. We are going through a tremendous technological revolution, not only in St. Louis and not only in the United States, but across the world. Transitioning St. Louis to the next chapter of its history is something this region can do, and something this region has done several times throughout its history. And I look forward to the next chapter. Freight and logistics could be the key. Through our Regional Freightway and the freight and logistics work that we do, we're working with people throughout the St. Louis region to improve the efficiencies and the opportunities to move the agriculture through St. Louis and through our markets to points beyond. More freight moves across the Mississippi River by rail at St. Louis than at any other point on the Mississippi River. And to the extent that we can expand those efficiencies and create greater opportunity, that helps everybody in St. Louis as we grow that sector of our economy. Well, I'm particularly excited about some of the things we're doing with public transportation. The station that's being constructed at Cortex, our entire Metro Reimagined project, looking at how we provide services. We never stop asking, is there a way to do it better? Is there something more we could be doing for the region? We don't really view ourselves as being in the 40-foot bus business or in the train business. We view ourselves as being in the people-moving business. Metrolink fits into a broader economic development strategy. It's not just a question of whether we should build a railroad. It's a question of how does that serve the overall economic development interests of the jurisdictions we serve and of the region as a whole. We are the national leaders in efficiency and reliability. The team that we have putting our service on the street every day, I would put up against any other team in the country. Leader in efficiency, leader in reliability. But we don't just rest on our laurels. What we're always looking at is there a better way to do something? Whether it's, is there a way to increase efficiency? Is there a better way to serve the market? Is there a better way for the public to feel secure when they're on it? And we don't rest. We've never stopped trying to figure out a way to improve it, and we will never stop looking for ways to improve it. That's what we do. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. How's lunch? Tell you they do a great job and they deserve a big round of applause for all of our servers, just like the mayor said. It is a tremendous pleasure to have all of you here this afternoon for our annual meeting. On behalf of our Board of Commissioners and staff, I can't tell you how delighted we are to see all of you. Each year we gather to thank our friends and partners, to report to our region on our accomplishments, challenges, and plans, and look forward to the year ahead with great anticipation. From the time of our incorporation by an act of Congress in 1950, Bi-State Development has had one overriding mission: to offer regional solutions to regional challenges for our member jurisdictions in creating economic opportunity and improving the lives of all of the residents throughout the Bi-State region. Over the past 67 years, we have seen great changes to our region, which have brought us great challenges and, more importantly, great opportunities. A new era of partnerships representing all of our neighborhoods, businesses, and interests, and including all of our people on all of our streets, is presenting itself as the path to our future. For our region, the key will be to mobilize the great common interests and strengths that we share, and which are more than sufficient to take on the great task of moving our region forward in an increasingly competitive global economy, where our competitors are no longer neighbors we see in our region, but rather are now all over the country and around the globe. At Bi-State Development, we work every day, indeed every hour, to be the resource to tackle any necessary task to advance the interests of our region. And I am glad for the opportunity to report on the state of Bi-State Development and our diverse enterprises which serve our region in so many critical ways. Let's start with the Gateway Arch, the transformation of which is nearly complete. When the arch was constructed, Bi-State Development financed the tram system which carries visitors to the top, and we are the only company which has operated the arch since it opened 50 years ago. Now we also handle the ticketing and much of the marketing for the arch. Our partnership with the National Park Service, we are proud to note, has made the arch the most visited monument west of Washington, D.C. The transformation, thank you. The transformation of the Arch grounds and visitor center experience better connect the Arch to downtown, resulting in increased economic activity and opportunity. I wish it were noted, frankly, more often how the Arch project is actually an example of so many good things about our region. Most of the money for the project was donated from private sources within our community and included public and private entities working together to preserve and enhance this iconic symbol of our region. The Arch has been bringing us together from the time it was first envisioned and continues to do so. Combined with our 2 excursion boats on the Mississippi River at the foot of the Gateway Arch, these assets constitute the components of our Tourism Innovation Division. With the completion of the Arch project in 2018, we are looking forward to an exciting future for this division of our company. 2 years ago, we formed the Bi-State Development Research Institute to serve the vital purposes of expanding the research capabilities of and for our enterprises and to open opportunities for our entities and the people we serve. Through this separate not-for-profit, we pursue opportunities which are not available to Bi-State Development as an entity in and of itself. I am very glad to report that in a very short period of time, the Research Institute is more than meeting our objectives. Just last week, food kiosks were established at 2 of our Metrolink stations as a pilot project to help bring fresh food to transit riders through a $584,000 grant from the Missouri Foundation for Health. Access to fresh food, to fresh and healthy food, is an important issue in some areas of our region. And using our natural gathering areas such as transit centers, we can help alleviate an important health and social equity issue. The Research Institute has also obtained a grant of nearly $1 million from the Federal Transit Administration to enable St. Louis County to reactivate its mobile health screening van and bring much needed access to health care for a substantial portion of our population for whom access to health care presents particular and frankly often unique challenges. These initiatives have received national recognition, and we were pleased to welcome the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Julian Castro, who specifically requested to meet with us because of these innovative ideas. Providing solutions that improve lives is at the core of our mission. We look forward to our Research Institute continuing to expand our partnerships and our horizons in 2018. St. Louis Downtown Airport serves one of the most important needs of the Bi-State region, providing and enhancing business aviation access to business centers in Illinois and Missouri. From the time we were asked to purchase, fix, and reopen that airport in the early 1960s, it has provided the closest runways to the business communities along the Mississippi River in the heart of our region. It remains a critical component of the region's economic development strategies and capabilities. It is not possible to overstate the importance of business aviation capabilities in the new competitive economic environment of the 21st century. Working with our partners in St. Clair County, Sauget, and Cahokia, the business park surrounding the airport has also become one of the largest concentrations of private sector employment in St. Clair County. The St. Louis Downtown Airport is another example of something you will hear from me incessantly: partnership. Public and private sector focusing on the critical elements to create opportunity. In 2015, we launched the St. Louis Regional Freightway at the request of the East-West Gateway Council of Governments. The main challenge presented was to provide leadership, coordination, planning, marketing, and advocacy for all of the region's tremendous freight and logistics assets. A very difficult cross-jurisdictional endeavor, which is why we were asked to do it. Working with a sense of urgency in a rather compressed time frame to quickly position our region favorably in a competitive national and global environment, we have advanced beyond our original business plan to date. Already, the Freightway effort has brought together all aspects of this very important economic sector. It has established the priority infrastructure list, established marketing and advocacy plans so that we have a sector champion, gained bi-state and bipartisan support across the jurisdictions, from the local level to the state level to the national level, and established relationships in other regions of the country. As mentioned in the video, no one in the country is talking about the potential of freight the way it is being talked about and pursued here in St. Louis. It is indeed fulfilling to work on an issue and issues which unite our region's many diverse political and economic elements with other critical partners and, importantly, potential partners. In February of this year, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Port of New Orleans to increase cooperation and marketing efforts among our two regions. Since Pierre Laclede landed here more than 250 years ago, there has never been a day that New Orleans has not been a key opportunity to our success. It is also important to note that in 2 of the last 3 years, from an infrastructure perspective, 2 of the last 3 years, including this year, there have been substantial difficulties in moving the harvest out of the Midwest and the upper Midwest to markets. While farmers continue to increase efficiencies, the abilities of our region and our states, and frankly many states around us, to capitalize on access to foreign and domestic markets is being limited by outdated infrastructure. Just this past week came the reports of a log jam in moving the corn and soybean harvest to and on the inland waterway system, resulting in lower prices to farmers at a time when crop yields are at near record levels and storage capacities are becoming exhausted. Last year, in the midst of another tremendous corn harvest, corn was actually imported into the southeastern United States from Argentina and Brazil because it was cheaper to do that than it was to move it from the heartland to the southeast. The resolution of these infrastructure issues are critical to our region's ability to capitalize on one of our greatest assets, our location. We stand at the furthest point you can reach on the Mississippi River, north of the Gulf of Mexico, unobstructed by locks and dams. Even with these significant challenges, the ability of the St. Louis port to move goods efficiently has attracted to it the label of agricultural coast, or Ag Coast as it's called. In short, no other port moves and transfers agricultural commodities as efficiently as the Port of St. Louis. Our challenge is to expand its capabilities and its opportunities. The Regional Freightway and our many partners are now bringing all of these issues to the forefront with tremendous cooperation and political support. The Merchants Railroad Bridge, just 3 miles north of the Eads Bridge, leads the infrastructure priority list as the #1 freight and logistics infrastructure project for our region. 2/3 of the estimated $225 million necessary to replace that structure has already been committed by the members of the Terminal Railroad Association. We are working diligently to keep our region competitive and finalize funding for that bridge, which we expect to do in 2018. Last fall, we were pleased to welcome the Federal Highway Administrator, Gregory Netto, to our headquarters, where he conducted one of his national freight roundtable discussions after learning of our initiatives. Look for more great things for the Regional Freightway in the years ahead. Metro Transit. Metro Transit continues to be and will be for the foreseeable future our largest and our most impactful enterprise on neighborhoods, citizens, workers, students, businesses, schools, families, and individuals. There is no one in our region who does not recognize its logo, but there are those who do not understand its business model and its impact. Moving more than 41 million riders annually with efficiency and reliability that have become the envy of the transit industry, it allows us to offer 3 modes of transit services: Call a Ride, Metrobus, and Metrolink at the most competitive price points. This year, the team achieved one of the rarest accomplishments in transit. We maintain cost-effectively a bus which has provided 1 million miles of service. If you want to know how rare that is, just Google public transit bus 1 million miles and see what comes up. St. Louis will come up and not much else. A study out of Washington, D.C. noted the St. Louis Metro Transit did the best job of the top 43 metropolitan areas in the country at managing the costs of bus maintenance over a 15-year period. In the past 18 months, we have completed the restoration of the historic Eads Bridge, opened the new North County Transit Center in Ferguson, opened the new Civic Center Transit Center in St. Louis, and began work on the new Metrolink station at Cortex in St. Louis, and we have pursued partnerships for new transit-oriented development in St. Clair County. With 75% of our customers riding to a job and 20% riding to school, Metro Transit provides one of the most critical elements to those who are supporting themselves and those looking to improve their futures. That element is access. Access to employment, access to education, access to independent lives, access to a brighter future. Were it not for Metro Transit, substantial portions of our community would be left without access to these essentials and would be left without hope. It is important to realize that in this 21st century, public transportation is also an essential element of successful economic strategies for successful regions. We saw this reiterated again with the recent request for proposals for a second Amazon headquarters in which public transit will be a key factor for the successful region. We're delighted to support that effort and to help in any way that we can. While we are very proud of our accomplishments and wish more people were aware of them, we are also very mindful of some of the most important challenges and issues. This year, security on the transit system, particularly Metrolink light rail system, has attracted much attention. Frankly, most of it negative. Our highest priority is not just to move people, but to move people safely. From the time Metrolink began policing the system, whether people think it is fair or unfair, has fallen on the local jurisdictions through which the system runs: St. Clair County, the City of St. Louis, and St. Louis County. This presents a tremendous challenge for these jurisdictions and the law enforcement agencies. Let no one doubt that policing the system falls to the jurisdictions, and it is a tremendous challenge for all. It falls to the jurisdictions because the Bi-State Development Charter specifically prohibits us from having a transit police department. Policing of the system requires tremendous cooperation among the jurisdictions and Metro Transit personnel. As the region has observed, there is a new level of commitment on this important issue, from the highest levels of the jurisdictions and the highest levels of bi-state development, to make the transit system safe and to spare no effort and no resources to reassure the public that it is safe. Many people ask us to cite statistics about safety on the system to show that, comparable to other systems around the country, it has some of the best safety characteristics and statistics, and we're glad to share the information. And while our statistics compare favorably, frankly, statistics do not reassure the customers or the public. Only a long-term commitment to policing the system, day in and day out, week after week, month after month, and year over year, visible to the public, resourced appropriately, and extraordinarily committed to that mission will provide that reassurance. We look forward to having the policing of the system achieve the same industry-leading results as the rest of our transit operation and a new era of partnership among our jurisdictions on this vital issue. We are delighted to see this cooperation. Frankly, we have one of the leaders in that effort, Mayor Cruson, who spoke. She deserves a big round of applause for what she's doing with this. We were pleased this year to welcome the Federal Transit Administrator, Carolyn Flowers, who loves to come and discuss our innovations. Supporting all of our enterprises is our talented staff at Bi-State Development. From finance to procurement, safety, economic development, marketing and communications, customer service, the incredible number of abilities and technical backgrounds it takes to make our companies successful is really kind of amazing. You might not know their names, but you certainly feel their impact. Every day we touch individuals, neighborhoods, and businesses all across our region. Over the last few years, we have achieved the highest levels of public sector accountabilities combined with private sector efficiencies. This year, our external auditors reported no findings in their audit of our finances. We submit to management performance audit, the latest of which this year reported no findings on improving the management of our company. Outstanding results, and I am very proud of all of it. As I said at the start of the meeting today, all of this starts with a committed Board of Commissioners. We are a service organization, and we are only as good as the people we can attract to our work. From our Board of Commissioners and throughout every aspect of our operations, we have been very fortunate to find and retain the people who will work together as a team to make us industry leaders in all of our sectors. As I have said many times, both across our region and across our country, I will put the accomplishments and talents of our team up against the best teams anywhere. As we look forward with great anticipation to the opportunities of the year ahead, I extend to you, each of you, from all of us at Bi-State Development, our sincere appreciation for all of the support we receive throughout the year, and to renew our commitment that we will continue to do everything within our power and imagination to continue to serve our region and to help keep our region moving forward to our bright future. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your tremendous support, and thank you for your attention this afternoon. Thank you. And now I have the most enjoyable responsibility of the afternoon, and that is to introduce to you our keynote speaker. I will tell you it is a great pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce James Bullard, who is the President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis and oversees the activities of the 8th Federal Reserve District of the United States. He is one of the most influential economists and economic scholars in the world. He makes public outreach and dialogue a priority to help build a more transparent and accessible Fed. He is also active in his community and serves as an honorary professor of economics at Washington University. He is sought out and listened to around the world. I was very pleased. I had the opportunity to have lunch with him about a year ago, and the conversation was so impactful on me and everybody else in the room. I thought it'd be a perfect speaker for a St. Louis audience, and particularly for this audience. A native of Forest Lake, Minnesota, he received his doctorate in economics from Indiana University in Bloomington. He holds bachelor's degrees in economics as well as quantitative methods and information systems from St. Cloud University in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I am very pleased that he is here with us because he is truly one of the great people in our community. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to James Bullard.
Well, good afternoon, and what a great audience here. I'm really looking forward to the remarks here and to challenge this audience, and also to a Q&A. I will take Q&A at the end if I can see any of you. These are bright lights up here, so I'm not really used to that. So we're going to need slides up here in order to do this. There we are. Can we go back one, or here? I'll go back. Nope. There we are. I wanted to start with this because it's I'm not going to talk about monetary policy here. The audience breathed a sigh of relief. I'm going to talk about something I think you'd be very interested in, which is living standards across U.S. Metropolitan statistical areas, and this represents, as I'm going to outline here, some research and some ideas I've been thinking about and that I've talked with John about over the last year or so. So this is kind of testing out the research results here. I'm anxious to hear what you guys think about it. So this is going to draw on some recent research at the St. Louis Fed, but it'll also be supplemented by additional recent research from outside the bank. Some of you know that the St. Louis Fed has one of the top economic research departments in the Federal Reserve and in fact in the world. So we're trying to leverage that to attack this particular issue. For those that want to see recent comments on monetary policy, you can look at my talk at Truman State University last week. And also during the Q&A, I'd be happy to entertain questions about monetary policy if you want to go in that direction. The paper I'm going to talk about is by my colleagues Cletus Coughlin, Chuck Gascon, and Kevin Cleason. It is available on our webpage. You can click on it. It's called Living Standards in St. Louis and the 8th Federal Reserve District. Let's get real. The things I'm going to talk about here in these slides are a little bit more preliminary than the published paper. And so I'm happy to take comments if you have any, or you know other people that have comments. I want to motivate this by, with the really large literature on international standards of living that is already out there. And in that literature, we economists try to address the question of which national economies are performing well and which national economies are performing less well for their citizens. And there's an established methodology for how to do that, and I'm going to copy that methodology. And again, you're just talking about whether the citizens are well off in terms of material well-being. You're not trying to get at anything else. It's just sort of pure economics, material well-being. Some countries do very well and are considered rich countries, like the United States. Others are do less well and are considered relatively poor on the world scale. So we would like to be able to make similar statements across metropolitan statistical areas in the US. So if you look at this international literature, you'll get a picture like this. The vertical axis is some kind of measure of real per capita income across countries, and each bar on this represents one country. And the US is called out there. It's toward the left in this picture, which means it's a relatively high per capita income. GDP is the same as income. And China and India are relatively low on this. And so we make statements that say, US is a relatively wealthy country, a relatively rich country in terms of per capita income, and China and India have lower standards of living because they have lower per capita income. So we want to make exactly these kinds of statements across US metropolitan statistical areas. Now, I just want to stress to people that just because you're the highest, we're one of the highest standards of living in the world doesn't mean that we're the fastest growing. It's well known, in particular, that China and India are faster growing countries, but they have lower standards of living. And I think it's, it's something where the statistics bear out actual experience. I think if you go to India or you go to China, you'll see a very different country than what you see here if you travel across the whole country. So let me just talk about MSAs in the US, and I think some of you probably know this, but we got the whole set of MSAs. An MSA is an area containing a large population center and adjacent counties with a high degree of integration with that center as measured by commuting patterns. So there is some science behind this about how you do this and how you define this. And it provides the natural unit for what we want to talk about here instead of artificial political boundaries, which are sort of dotted lines around certain areas. We want to talk about the economic unit, and I think the MSA is designed to do that, and so we're gonna do that. And certainly bi-state development is all about getting the whole region to work together. About 90% of U.S. GDP is produced in metropolitan statistical areas. We're going to look at the whole set here, 381 MSAs in the U.S. About 86% of the U.S. population lived in these places. The smallest was Carson City, Nevada, 54,000 people. 50,000 is the cutoff here, so they won't define an MSA smaller than that. Largest is New York City, population 20 million. The median population about 238,000, average population 721,000. So this means these big cities are really big compared to the Carson City, Nevadas of the world. So you have a lot of skewness in this distribution, size distribution of cities. So what we're going to do, because it's so skewed, is that we're also going to consider just a set of the very largest MSAs in the sample, having a population of at least 1 million. For that group, about 56% of the population lives in that group. There are 53 of these large MSAs. St. Louis is one of them. Tucson, Arizona is the smallest, about 1 million. New York's the largest. Median population for this large set, 2.3 million. Average population, 3.4 million. Those numbers are not too far from the St. Louis area. And there's skewness even among the large MSAs, but it's not as extreme as for the whole set of MSAs. So we're going to report results for both sets. And here's a picture that I love that our staff did to give you an idea about what we're talking about here. Those blue, darker blue are the 53 large MSAs in the country. And again, you're talking about half of GDP is in those blue, darker blue blocks. If you add in the lighter blue blocks, you get the entire set of MSAs. You got 90% of GDP being produced in those areas. So this is what we're talking about. And the question is, I look at this map, which of these are performing the best and which are performing less well based on per capita income? Now, a key to this research is the idea of price levels by MSA, and those of you that know me and have heard me talk about this know where I'm going on this. Prices vary greatly across the U.S., and certainly we all have an intuitive sense that some places are wildly expensive and other places are very inexpensive. And the good thing is that recently there's been more systematic accounting of this, and better data has been developed on regional price level differences. And we're going to use this new data. That's what makes this, really interesting to macroeconomic people like me. Hey, some new data that we can use. But we're going to use this new data to calculate the real income per capita across these MSAs. So these new data are called regional price parities, RPPs. They measure the differences in price levels by MSA, across MSAs, in a given year. So it's annual data. This is done by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. These data was started to be published in 2014. So in the world of research, that's just like yesterday. They just became available, and so we're starting to use them. They are available back to 2008, but here in this talk, I'm mainly just going to focus on one particular year, the most recent year for which we have complete data, which is 2015. These RPPs are expressed as a percentage of the national price level. So you'll see numbers like 90 or 110. That means 90% of the national price level or 110% of the national price level. And this covers all consumption goods and services and includes rents, and that's a key aspect of what I'm talking about here. So a key issue here is, well, why do these prices differ across different parts of the country? If you think of something like gas stations, I can always go to the next gas station and it should be competitive with the last gas station I was at, and therefore the prices should be just about the same across the cities. But the reason prices differ is housing costs, and the housing differentials are huge. I've got an example here from Zillow data. St. Louis median house is about $105 per square foot. Median home in San Francisco about $479 per square foot. That's a ratio of about 5 to 1. And I think we know this intuitively, that these housing costs are so substantially different that it really affects your standard of living if you live in different places around the country. So here's a picture. I've got two pictures like this. This is a 3D picture from metrocosm.com. And the basic message of this picture, yellow and orange means, $200 to $500 per square foot for housing costs. The darker colors are, less than 50 up to 100 or $150 per square foot. And the basic idea that you get from this picture is the East Coast, Boston, New York, DC, South Florida, and especially the California coast and Hawaii are extremely expensive on this measure. The middle part of the country, much less expensive. Aspen, Colorado comes out to be the very highest here. I think this is by zip code, not by MSA. Aspen isn't actually that big of a place. This is another picture that shows the same kind of thing, the share of households that can afford payments on the median priced single-family home. And dark green means 3/4 of the households could afford to buy the median house in that particular area. Red means that less than 1/3 of the households could afford to buy even the median house in that particular area. So you can see in this picture that the West Coast is all red. So that means it's very unaffordable even for most households to buy the median house in that area. Not talking about buying the very best house in the area, just the median house in the area. Whereas the same can be said for the East Coast, Boston and New York, Florida. And then in the middle west part of the country, we get much more affordability, and you get things like 2/3 or 3/4 of the households can afford to buy the median house in that area. So this is just another way to say what we already know, that housing costs are very different across the country. This affects your lifestyle, it affects your standard of living across the country, and it shows up in these RPPs, these regional price parity numbers for different parts of the country. So the least expensive MSA is Beckley, West Virginia. It has an RPP of about 80%, so about 80% of the national price level, so it's cheaper to live there. The most expensive is Honolulu, 125%, and St. Louis is a little over 90% of the national average. Okay, so we're ready to do our calculation. What is real income per capita across these MSAs? We're going to take real income per capita for each MSA and adjust it based on these regional price levels. And that's going to give us the standard of living as the average level of real income per person for a particular location, analogous to the cross-country literature graph that I showed you at the beginning. Now, I don't have median data here, I don't have the average, and so this isn't going to take into account income inequality. You might be saying, okay, the MSA generates a certain amount of income, that's income per person. We're not really saying who's getting the income, that's income inequality. But I'm going to come back with a section later that's going to talk about income inequality, including for St. Louis, and we'll take a look at that at the end. So the measure of real income is going to be personal, per capita personal income adjusted for inflation, so this is real purchasing power. Another possibility would be to look at household income, and if you read the paper, they do look at household income. I think that's probably a less good way to look at it, but if you want to get into that, we can talk about it. And then if we divide by this RPP for that particular MSA, we're going to get this real income per capita adjusted for regional price differentials. I'm going to focus on 2015 only here. So here's the result for the St. Louis MSA. We had a RPP adjusted real personal income per capita that was about 12% higher than the national average. Among the 53 largest MSAs, we ranked number 7 in the nation. Among the complete set of 381 MSAs, St. Louis ranks about 20, which is in the top 6% or so. So another way to say this is St. Louis standard of living is higher than about 94% of the MSAs in the nation. Another way to say this is if I randomly reallocated all of you to other MSAs, you're probably going to be worse, and you're the average guy, you're probably going to be worse off going to one of those other MSAs than staying here in St. Louis. So this is a good set of numbers for St. Louis, and I think highlights how well this region really does and puts, brings into stark relief the high standard of living that exists in this part of the country. So what I'm going to do in the rest of the talk is show tables that expand on this result right here and talk about it in a variety of ways. So here's the picture analogous to the cross-country picture that we looked at the beginning. So this is our measure of real per capita income. One would mean that you are the same as the national average in that particular MSA. Higher than that means you're higher than the national average. And you can see this is arranged, MSAs are arranged from highest to lowest, going from left to right in this picture. Each bar represents an MSA. We put St. Louis on here, and we put the 3 largest MSAs in the country, New York, Chicago, and LA, that are all trailing us in standard of living. You can see there's, this is an S-shaped curve, which I think is interesting. Some places do extremely well. The very highest bar there on the far left, I believe, is Midland, Texas. So something about oil boom going on there. And then things gradually trail off, and then some places are substantially lower in standard of living than the nation as a whole. But basically, St. Louis does extremely well on this. Now, this is the whole set of 381 MSAs. We might also want to look at the very largest MSAs, and here they are. These are the 53 largest ones. Again, we've called out St. Louis, and then the 3 largest ones, which are New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, which are trailing us. And I'm going to show you some pictures here in just a minute of the top 10 here, which we are in the top 10. Now, one thing about this picture and interpreting this, the ones on the far left there are clearly doing something right, because they're much higher or substantially higher than the national average. And then when you get to St. Louis, we're at the high end, but the cities behind us are not too far behind us, so you've got a lot of more or less equal cities that are, the slope is not very steep there. And we're going to look at that also. So now what I'm going to do is just focus the rest of the time on the top 10 large MSAs, and we're number 7 in that group, and just look at who they are. So this is a table that shows you how this came out. St. Louis is number 7. We're about that 1.13 for us, means about 13% above the national standard of living. Our competitors are here in this top 10 list. We've got the Bay Area does extremely well here. The tech boom has been going on for at least 20 years there. And it really shows in these numbers. They're number 1 and 2. They're really the same place, San Jose, California, and San Francisco. Boston doing very well, Seattle. also a tech hub. Seattle has Amazon and Microsoft. Then you get to Washington, D.C., and the bottom 5 in this list out of the top 10, and they're very close to being equal. So there's not a huge difference between them, but we are in the top 10. Now, some of these in this group have a high cost of living, and some of them have a low cost of living. So one thing we could add to the list is say, okay, among these that have a high standard of living, which are the low cost areas and which are the high cost areas? And we're going to do that here. And as you might have surmised just looking through this list, it's only us and Nashville, Tennessee that have this lower cost of living. All the others in this list either have cost of living at the national average or considerably higher than the national average in the case of San Jose, California, and San Francisco, or even Boston, or even Seattle or Washington, D.C. Now, I mean, these might just, you might just think, well, gee, Jim, these are just numbers on a table. But, you know, you think about what this means. You're talking about 90% here, you're talking about 110% in Boston. That's a 20% cost differential. You think about 121 in San Francisco, or, you know, close to that in Washington, D.C., that's a 30% cost differential. So if you're a company and you're producing product here and then shipping it around the country versus producing product in Washington, D.C. or San Francisco and trying to ship it around the country, those other guys have a 30% disadvantage in cost compared to St. Louis or Nashville. So those are huge differences. Can you imagine trying to run your business and your opponent has a 30% cost advantage on you? You're going to get killed. So I think this is one of the biggest things about St. Louis and Nashville on this list. And Nashville's going to turn out to be basically identical to St. Louis in these numbers. Is that we have tremendous cost advantage over our rivals among the cities that have the highest standard of living in the nation. Now, just to keep perspective on what we're talking about here, the international income distribution is a lot more unequal than the US income distribution. If you take the ratio of the 90th percentile to the 10th percentile across MSAs, you're going to get a number of 1.37. So what does that mean? That means that the average guy in the kind of the rich city is making about 35, 37% more than the average guy in the poor city that's in the 10th percentile. So that's a difference of 35, 40% across that spectrum. If you do the same thing in the international data, you get a stunning number, 28. So that means that the guy in the 90th percentile of the rich countries is making 28 times what the guy in probably a sub-Saharan African country is making. So the international income differentials are so staggering, they make your jaw drop. And that remains true even if you focus on a more homogeneous set of countries, for instance, just European countries. If you do the 90-10 ratio, you get 3.8. And if you do the OECD countries, you get 2.1. So within the international context, that 1.37 is not a huge number. But when we think about competing across MSAs within the USA, 35 or 40% is a big number. So you've got to keep everything sort of in perspective when you're looking at this here. So now we're going to go to the income inequality idea within MSAs. Obviously, we're just averaging across all the people in the St. Louis MSA. Some are doing well, some aren't doing very well. We'd like to be able to account for that and get the idea of how much income inequality is there within these different MSAs. The data that I'm looking at does not account for the distribution of income, so I'm going to have to go to a different paper, and it's going to be the paper that's cited here by 3 authors that I don't know very well, but we're going to use their research. They have studied the issue of income inequality across MSAs. Turns out that St. Louis is kind of average in terms of income inequality, and some of our rivals on the top 10 list have very high income inequality, and we're going to look at that here. So here's the picture. This isn't per capita income anymore. This is a measure of income inequality. And the MSAs are along the horizontal as we had before, and the measure of inequality is on the vertical axis. And the measure of inequality is the ratio of the average income of the guy in the top 1% versus the average income of the guy in the bottom 99%. And if you look at that ratio for New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, which are listed there, those numbers are all higher. St. Louis is down the list. I wouldn't say it's exactly low, but it's close to the middle of the distribution here as you go off to the right in this picture. You've got the one with the highest, the MSA with the highest inequality is Bridgeport, Connecticut. I don't know too much about that MSA, but the kind of rumor would be a lot of hedge fund type people like to live in Bridgeport, and probably has also a poor segment of its MSA, and that's creating a lot of inequality in that particular place. But I think the main message of this is that the larger cities tend to be places where the income inequality is quite a bit higher than it is for the rest of the MSAs. And this is all 380 of them here. So now we can put that extra column on our top 10 list here. So this is the same table that we had before with our measure of per capita income. We're number 7 on the list. We've got our measure of cost of living, the RPP. We're low cost. And then we've got our measure of inequality in this last column. And I just want to focus on this for a minute. Because some of these cities have pretty high inequality. And what cities are they? They're the Bay Area cities that have inequality numbers around around 30. Boston, very high. Houston, also quite high. But the other cities on this list are probably comparable to St. Louis, kind of in the middle. Nashville in particular is close to us. Minneapolis, close to us. Seattle, a little bit higher, but generally speaking, close to us. Washington, D.C. actually comes out with relatively low inequality. I think the federal government there provides a lot of income across a very large swath of the workforce there, and so it's kind of a different city from other places. So the message I would like to take, and this is the talk's about over here, so you can wake up again. The message I'd like you to take is that among the top 10 places for standard of living in the U.S., there's only 2 that are low cost. That's us and Nashville. And then and Nashville's really almost identical to us on this across the board here. And that among the ones that do better than us on standard of living, they're high cost, they're higher cost than us, but some of them also have quite a bit higher inequality than what we have here. So I'm going to stop there. I think we're about done. Oh, I got one more thing. We often talk about economic growth, and I think in a lot of the discussion that I've had with all of you, we think of growth as being the measure of how well we're doing, whereas I'm talking about the level, the standard of living level that we're at. If we don't grow, then others will catch up to us and pass us in per capita income. But economic growth is not the same as standard of living. Now, in the cross-country literature, it's well understood that some of the poorer countries are also the fast-growing countries, and that's certainly happening with China and India. If you look at their growth rates, 6-7% per year, year in and year out, U.S. is growing at 2% a year, year in and year out. After a while, they're going to catch up in per capita income if they continue to grow faster than us. However, the standard of living as of today is still low, by a factor of 5 to 10 than it is in the U.S. So they have relatively low standard of living, even though they're growing really fast. You might say the same thing about MSAs, but I don't really have enough data here to get at this issue, and so we're going to have to defer that to a future day. Of course, it'd be great to be growing fast, but I think the point here is that the level of per capita income is high in St. Louis. Okay, so let's conclude. If you want to think about these issues, you have to adjust for price differences across MSAs and housing prices in particular. Otherwise, you won't have meaningful comparison about the standard of living across MSAs. So I used some recent data that's become available on this issue. We used that to calculate per capita income across MSAs. And I'm hopeful that we can use this kind of data to keep perspective on where we are and what we have to do to get better and where our competition is in the U.S. Going forward. So I'm going to stop there and let you guys ask some questions. So thanks very much. You've been very attentive and very patient. I think we have microphones over on this side and another one over on this side, so you're going to have to troop up to the microphone if you want to get a question. I prefer softball questions, so if you want to.
Sorry about that, no softball.
Yeah.
Dr. Bullard, I don't think the data correlates with how most people in the region would feel about our success.
Yes, I'm trying to shock you into what's really going on here. This is what's really going on. These are the numbers. This is the data. Now from here you can go say all kinds of other things.
What do you think the reason is for that lack of correlation between what you're presenting and how probably most of us feel? Humbleness?
There is a Midwestern humbleness, I would say that. But some of the other places, not just St. Louis, it's that the coastal story has become very popular in the last 20 years. And I think that's mostly because of the tech boom. And the tech boom is a great story, and these tech companies are coming to dominate the US economy. And that makes places like Seattle and the Bay Area look very, very good. And they look good in this data as well. But then you forget about, well, what about Minneapolis? Forget about St. Louis, but what about Minneapolis? What about Nashville? What about Houston? Are those also places with high standard of living? And they are according to these data. So, you know, I think the idea that everybody's got to scramble out to San Francisco to get into the tech boom, I always think is a little bit funny. I mean, you could do that from anywhere. You don't have to be out there paying 30% more than what you're paying here. Please.
Okay. Since we're here at a transit agency, I thought I'd ask a transit-related question. How did your data compensate for the difference in utility of private car ownership versus the availability of mass transit? In other words, dense areas would obviously have higher property costs, but also much higher cost of owning cars. The flip side of that, something came out in the Ferguson Commission, is the affordability of mass transit. If you are living in a high-cost area and you have good mass transit, and you compare that, how do you compare that to living in perhaps a low-cost area which has car ownership as a prerequisite to working?
Well, I think it's a great question, and the answer is this data does not address that question. So what I wanted to get at is this international comparison literature. So when we're saying Switzerland has a high standard of living, US has a high standard of living, UK has a high standard of living, we're not telling stories about the transportation network in those countries. We're not telling, you know, there are a whole host of things that are going to be a lot better in those three countries than they're going to be in Latin America or sub-Saharan Africa. There's going to be dramatic differences on all kinds of dimensions between those kinds of countries on the international scale. And you want to think of the MSA in the same way. Different MSAs are going to have different transportation network needs. I think the coastal cities in particular seem to be, at least from afar, seem to be extremely congested because they're limited in what they can do with their geography, and this creates a lot of complications about getting around. I mean, New York City, who thought of the idea of putting 20 million people on that island? I mean, that was like the stupidest thing we ever did. So I think, you know, what the advantage of the Midwest is, you know, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Dallas, Houston, you've got areas where you can spread out, and if you can build a realistic transportation network, you can keep this cost of housing more competitive than what you see in these coastal communities, and this provides tremendous cost advantage in the Midwest compared to the coast. So I think that's what's going on in spades, and it seems to be getting even, you know, the prices are increasing, you know, more and more. If you look internationally at these cities, the house prices are increasing more and more. In the sort of glam cities or coast cities that people seem to want to pay a lot for their housing. So I think the Midwest has a great advantage on that. Now, being in the Midwest all by itself, even with a cost advantage, doesn't mean you'll be a great MSA. You also have to have the jobs in the city that are good enough or, you know, that are going to provide a high standard of living. So not all the cities on this list are in the Midwest, you know, and so it's kind of you're competing against a rival that has might have other advantages, but cost is not one of them. And I think we're doing very well against the list here. So, please.
For the international one, people can't move between countries. But for cities, people can move.
Brilliant.
So you're saying the living standards are 20, 50% different, and people aren't apparently moving given migration statistics. Yep. Is it because of cost, or is it because of amenities you don't measure? If it's amenities, it might be interesting to compare the differences to things like public transportation, like the previous speaker said, are the things that might suggest more investment in the bi-state regional development. If these are amenities they control, they explain why we don't see migration moving in the direction you suggest.
Yep.
Maybe there are things that can be done.
Brilliant, brilliant question. So if the standard of living is better somewhere else, then you would think people would say, hey, I'm going to move to the somewhere else. If you're the average guy, we're talking about the average guy here too. We're not talking about the rich people. They can fly wherever they want. So, but the average person might say, gee, my life will be a lot better if I go over from the poor country to the rich country, and therefore I'm going to move to the rich country. And that does happen internationally in spades, I would say. But you know, if you talk to people from poorer countries, they complain about brain drain. They complain about their most talented people wanting to be in Europe or the U.S., and so that happens. It doesn't happen on a grand scale because of immigration restrictions across countries, and therefore what you see across countries is a lot of inequality across countries internationally. Now, when I showed you the MSA distribution, it's way flatter. So I think that process has gone on over the last 50 years or 100 years in the U.S., and people have moved to places where they thought the economic opportunity was bigger and where they could do better. And in order to get that process to work appropriately, people have to have the right perception about where the economic opportunity really is. This would say, to a young person, this would say that places like San Francisco and Boston are good, but it would also say places like Minneapolis and Nashville are also good, and St. Louis also good. So the fact that labor does not move internationally means that that distribution is not getting equalized the same way that it has in the U.S. It's much more equal in the U.S. across places, but not completely equal. You still have a 35 or 40% differential between the 90th percentile MSA and the 10th percentile MSA. Okay, I think I've exhausted you, so. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. What a great audience. I really appreciate it. So.
I told you he was tremendous. He just took 600 people and held them spellbound with economic statistics. For Jim, thank you very, very much. He deserves a big round of applause again. Just outstanding. This concludes our meeting. Thanks you all for being here. Thank you for your support. We will look forward to seeing you next year. And more importantly, we will look forward to seeing you every day throughout our region. Thank you very, very much.